I'm Ed Pruitt of Wow Action Services, and we're interviewing Farrell Chiles. And the date today is August 28th, 2014. We're at the African American Museum of Beginnings in Pomona, California. Farrell, where and when were you born?
I was born in Greenville, South Carolina in July 1949.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father was James Chiles Jr., and he was a truck driver when I was born, and my mother was Louise Chapman Chiles, and she was a housewife.
Who were your siblings? Their names and genders, please.
I have 4 siblings, a sister Susan, a sister Portia, a sister Renee, and a brother Stanley.
Did any serve in the military?
I'm the only one that served in the military.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was a student at Arkansas A&M College in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and I was a part-time sports reporter for the Pine Bluff Commercial Daily newspaper.
In which branch of military did you serve?
I served in the Army.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted. My draft number was 13.
Oh, okay. What happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
Well, I was inducted in Fort Wayne, Detroit, and we were sent to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I did 8 weeks of basic training there.
Do you recall any of your instructors, and if so, what were they like?
I remember my drill instructor, and his name was Sergeant Alonzo, and he was a typical drill sergeant, however they are.
Did you receive any specialized training, and if so, what?
After basic training, I was sent to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I was trained as a military policeman.
How did you adapt to military life, including the physical regiment, barracks, food, and social life?
I had spent time in college, so being away from home was not a problem. You know, bad food is bad food. But I was a social person, so it didn't affect me at all.
Were you in the military during wartime?
Yes, during the Vietnam War.
Where did you serve?
I served in Vietnam for 7.5 months in Cam Ranh Bay.
What are some of your memories you have of that experience?
Well, I remember 2 things in particular. One was that Sammy Davis Jr. Was entertaining the troops, and I got to be a part of his security force. And I was also part of a force that went to process the Whiskey Mountain 13.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you on the front lines?
No, I wasn't. If there was such a thing as a front line, I wasn't on the front line.
Okay. What were your duties?
I was a military policeman, and more specifically, I was the desk sergeant at the MP station.
Did you witness casualties and destruction?
Somewhat, but no major destructions except when incoming came in and something was bombed or something, but nothing really specific.
What were your feelings when you witnessed even that degree of destruction? What were your feelings?
Well, it hit me because any kind of destruction, killing is just does not suit me well at all.
Mm-hmm. What kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form while serving, and with whom?
Well, basically in basic training with those folks that were in the company that I was in, as well as in the advanced individual training. And then certain unit members you get a close association with.
Did you stay in touch with any of those guys?
None of them.
Okay. How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
I called my mother one time while I was there, but most of the time, and I would say probably once a month, I would send her a postcard. And on the postcard, I would say, "I'm okay," and sign it me.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
Off-duty hours, playing basketball and maybe volleyball, or going to the club to watch entertainment.
Where were you when the war ended?
Well, when the war ended, I was back stateside. I was sent home early before my time was up. They were downsizing the war, and I was sent home early. So when the war ended in probably 1975, I was back in civilian life.
How were you received by family and community when you got back?
That's strange to say. I came back by myself.
Okay.
And I stayed home for a week, and then I left and moved to California.
So how did you readjust to civilian life?
I got a job and went to school on the GI Bill and adapted in a normal way, I guess.
Have you had an opportunity to reunite with any veterans that you knew back then?
None of them.
Okay. Are you a member of any veterans organizations, and if so, which?
Quite a few. I belong to the Veteran of Foreign Wars. I belong to American Legion. I belong to DAV and other military organizations like the ROCs, the Warrant Officer Association, etc. And it just told stories about me in terms of I was in Germany from 70 to 71. I was in Vietnam from 71 to 72. That I was part of the 18th MP Brigade, part of the Military Police Corps. That I was from Detroit, and then I went by the name of Brother Chiles.
Perfect. What have you done since separating from the military?
Well, I'm retired now, and actually I stayed in the military after the war and did 38 years of military service. After 20 years as an enlisted person, I became a warrant officer, and I was a warrant officer for 18 years. And I've served on different boards to include the Tuskegee Airmen Scholarship Foundation, so I've stayed actively involved with the military.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life in general?
I'm not sure, but I know it has, because people tell me all the time that they can see, oh, you were in the military. I have no idea what they're talking about, but I guess it's the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you conduct yourself. So yes, it has affected me.
Okay, what are some life lessons learned from military service?
I've learned about discipline. I've learned about time management. The military teaches you certain ideals that you should stand up to, and I think I've done most of those because it's helped me not only deal with people but also to deal with myself. And because of my military career, I found a fondness for military history, specifically African Americans in military history, and I've written several articles on military folks, and I have a large collection of over 100 books on African Americans in the military. So I would say if I had not been in the military, I would not have that subject matter interest.
Now, I understand that you are writing a book. Can you tell us about your book?
Sure. The book is called African American Warrant Officers in Service to Our Country, and it consists of facts, biographies, profiles, stories about African American warrant officers from World War II to the present time, and our contributions, achievements, and the successes that we've had both in the military and outside.
Now, what inspired you to sit down? I know you said you've written articles in the past. What inspired you to sit down and write a book?
As I said before, I did 38 years of military service, and in 2004, I was mobilized, and I was sent to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for a year. And I was cross-level with the unit, so when I got to Fort Leonard Wood, I didn't know anyone there. And I got a good job assignment, but in the evenings I was by myself. So I did two things. I ordered books to read on political subjects, and two, I decided to do some research on African American warrant officers. Specifically, I had went to Hawaii one year and went by the gift shop at Pearl Harbor, and I found this book about the first 13 officers, African American officers in the Navy, and one was a warrant officer. So I found out he was the first Navy warrant officer, and I thought it'd be interesting to find out who the first Army warrant officer was. And I started doing research on it, and to this day I still have not found out who the first one was. I know back in early 1943, maybe there were 13. I just don't know who they all were or who the first one was.
And when is your book scheduled to be released?
Sometime in December, hopefully in time for Martin Luther King Day as well as Black History Month. I did 38 years. They weren't all good years, but I feel that I was making a contribution to our country. I feel that African Americans, we are part of this country, and we should be a part of all aspects of the country. And I'm amazed at the number of people, African Americans, who have served our country and in the different statuses that they performed in, and their achievements. So I am proud to be an African American that served in the military. I got drafted. It wasn't my intent to be in the military at all.
Okay.
But I found something to belong to: the camaraderie, the fraternity of soldiers, and the networking, and just opportunities with the GI Bill, and so it's benefited me. And I'm sure anyone concerning the military, you have to find out what the benefits are to you and make a decision as to whether you want to be in the military or not.
You know, you previously mentioned you're a member of several organizations. Tell us about the organizations.
You know, the most important organization I think that I became a part of was the Tuskegee Airmen Scholarship Foundation, as well as being a member of the board of directors of the LA chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. I not only got to meet some outstanding gentlemen, pioneers, leaders, but I was able to learn more about the history of African Americans in the military, and I got to be involved in a lot of their activities. The Scholarship Foundation was, it just was so significant that I could participate in that and pass on the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen to young folks through providing scholarships. And then I was also on the board of directors of the United States Army Warrant Officers Association. I just love warrant officers. That's why I became one. And just that affiliation has been tremendous for me.
So if you tell us about this book.
As Big as It Gets, it's my first book. It was published in 2010, and it chronicles my time and tenure as chairman of the board of an organization called Blacks in Government, which was founded in 1975. I was elected as chairman of the board and re-elected for five years, which is the longest tenure of any chairman of the board. I provide information on my observations, some of the things that I encountered, and I also try to share some lessons in leadership to not only inspire other folks to take on responsibilities and duties of nonprofit organizations, but to steer them in the right direction so they will make some of the mistakes that I made. So it's part of lessons learned, it's part of case history, and it's me sharing my experiences as a leader in a professional organization. And I'm the author of an upcoming book called African American Warrant Officers in Service to Our Country. I was a warrant officer for 18 years in the Army, and during that time I met some outstanding African Americans who were warrant officers, And unfortunately, their story has not been told, and most people aren't even aware of what warrant officers are. So I have done extensive research and identified some exceptional warrant officers dating back from World War II to present. And I wanted to share their stories, their successes, their contributions to not just the United States, but to the Army as well. And so I have this new book, African American Warrant Officers in Service to Our Country. It's scheduled for release the end of December, just in time for perhaps the Christmas season, the Martin Luther King weekend, and more importantly, African American History Month in February. The book will be available online at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and through the publisher booklocker.com. I share my collection with the African American Museum of Beginnings because in reality they were stuck in my garage, and my wife said, you got to get it out of the garage, you got to do something with it. And I looked at several things that I could do with it, but I felt that this was the most important way to make a contribution and share what I have with the African American community. This here is a collecting place for different artifacts pertaining to African American history, and the attendants and people attending and coming to this museum, they need to see all aspects of African American life. And I think that by sharing with them what I have is making a difference. It allows them to see something that perhaps they've never seen before, and it might encourage them to do their own research, to do their own collections, to write, and also to share, and to be familiar with what we've done in the past and be inspired by that as well. I have pieces here which are part of my Frederick Douglass collection. I started collecting Frederick Douglass in 2004, late 2004, and that statue there was the first piece that I collected. I went on the internet, I found a piece that I really liked. I contacted the sculptor, but it wasn't available. Then I found another one, and that's the piece that I purchased. And then I started to develop other things around it, meaning books, other artifacts. And what I have here are certain books from my collection, The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. I remember this book when I was in college. And I had it, and I donated it to the San Francisco Historical Museum. And then when I started collecting Frederick Douglass, I wanted that book because that was the book with that picture, etc. So this is a piece, and this is a piece, another piece here. There's a piece back there from America I Am that I picked up when it was exhibited down in Los Angeles. And I have other pieces that are part of the collection, but for this museum display, I just have several books and the statue. And I've displayed the Frederick Douglass at the La Habra Library, the Pomona Library, and one other which I just can't remember right, the Cypress Library. I'm very proud of Frederick Douglass. He's my favorite, and I call him politician. I just thought he was an abolitionist, but he was an outstanding leader. He was a powerful speaker, and his story is remarkable. And every person should know about Frederick Douglass, know about his 4th of July speech, and just some of the things that he wrote about and what he stood and his thoughts on African Americans and how we fit into United States society. I'm in front of my Tuskegee Airmen display. It's been here at the museum since April 2012, maybe 2011, I'm not sure. But it was one of the very first displays here in the museum. I have a fascination with the Tuskegee Airmen. I've been a part of the Tuskegee Airmen Scholarship Foundation as well as the local Los Angeles chapter. What we have in the display is a book called Lonely Eagles, written by a guy named Bob Rose, who tells about the history of the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. Also on display is the Congressional Gold Medal reception book when they received the Congressional Gold Medal on March 29, 2007. I had some of the patches that they wore on their uniforms, just some small replicas of who they are. I bought this model plane. I think I paid about $400 for it, and it's got some autograph signatures of some Tuskegee Airmen, and many of them who I know. Yeah, most of them are from the Los Angeles chapter, and I know most of them. There's Ted Lumpkin in there. There's Jerry Hodges, Ed Tillman, and others that I just can't recall the names right off. Oliver Goodall and others. And you know, my association with them goes back to about 2002, and it's been outstanding knowing them and meeting them and sharing their stories with others. They were pioneers. They were trailblazers before we knew about Jackie Robinson and the Board of Education, Brown versus. Before Martin Luther King, we knew about the Tuskegee Airmen, and if we didn't know about them, they were there, and they made a difference. And I'm glad they're getting the honors and the attributes that they so rightly deserve today, even though most of them are passing on or they're in their early 90s. And I do know one Tuskegee Airman that's 102 years old, and I attended his birthday celebration earlier this year. You know, I have enjoyed my affiliation with Jackie Robinson. I remember him when I was a kid in Detroit. He was the first African American to play in the major leagues, in the modern major leagues. He broke in, I believe it was in 1948, but don't quote me on that. Played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And I'm also fascinated by him because he was a military person before he made the major leagues. I have been collecting Jackie Robinson mementos since for at least the last 10 years, and the Jackie Robinson book, these portraits, the Time magazine cover, and there's some other pieces throughout the museum that belong to me. Again, I was able to go to the premiere of 42 when that movie came out. I've exhibited the Jackie Robinson display at the Jackie Robinson Baseball Stadium in West Los Angeles, where the UCLA Bruins played baseball. It's been exhibited at the El Monte Library, the Pomona Library, and probably a couple other places as well. I have probably over a dozen books written by or written about Jackie Robinson, and he has a remarkable story. Again, it's a story that everyone should know about. One of the significant things about Jackie Robinson is that Major League Baseball retired his number 42 several years ago, and every year on April 15th, all players in the Major League wear number 42 in honor of Jackie Robinson. So again, he's my favorite baseball player of all times for what he was able to achieve, Rookie of the Year, and he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I've met some of the players that played with him, and I'm just fascinated by Jackie Robinson and what he was able to accomplish and the significance that he plays in the role of African American in baseball history. This is my Rosa Parks display. Rosa Parks was the mother of the modern civil rights era. She is the one that sat on the bus so we could all stand up. She was out of Alabama. I started collecting Rosa Parks memorabilia when I first collected her Congressional Gold Medal. It's not displayed here currently. It was displayed here. It's at another display. I met her one time. It was in Los Angeles. In this display, I have a large 8x10 photo of her. I have some books. Her story is remarkable. At one point, after she moved out of Alabama, she worked for Congressman John Conyers in Detroit. And there's a Rosa Parks Institute located in Detroit as well. She was a pioneer. She was a leader, well respected, and her funeral in Detroit was well attended. Old lady, much to be admired. You know, in honor of Veterans Day, I would like to share with you the stories of two African Americans from the greatest generation who participated in World War II. As we celebrate Veterans Day, I'd like to throw a salute out to all those veterans, to all those folks currently serving in the military and their families for their contribution and service to our country. The first veteran I'd like to talk about is a guy by the name of Oliver Goodall. Oliver Goodall was an original Tuskegee Airman. He served with the 447th Bomber Group, and he was part of the mutiny in 1945 when they were not allowed to enter an all-white officers club. Oliver eventually settled in Pasadena, and in 2010 we lost Oliver at age 88. I served with Oliver on the board of directors of the Los Angeles chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, and I also served with them on the Tuskegee Airmen Scholarship Foundation. But we had a good relationship, and I say that because Oliver lived in Altadena, and every now and then he would call me up and he would say, "Farrell, come on over, I have some oranges for you." And I would drive over, and the oranges were in the tree, and I wasn't going to climb the tree. Oliver would climb up in the tree and loop his leg over one of the branches and knock down the oranges for me to pick up and take home. But that's not what it was all about. Oliver just wanted someone to talk to, and I knew that, and I did not mind making that trip over to Altadena to sit around for an hour or so, just hearing conversations, hearing the war stories about what he did when he was in the military and about the Tuskegee Airmen. And I mean, when you walked into his room, you saw a museum of nothing but Tuskegee Airmen stuff, and it was all remarkable they had collected over the years. Oliver died, and when he died, his local congressman put a bill before the House and the Senate as well, and they renamed the Pasadena, Maine post office in his honor, the First Lieutenant Oliver Goodall Post Office. And I was also in attendance for that inauguration of that post office and the naming of it as the Oliver Goodall Post Office. The second person I'd like to talk about is a guy by the name of Leonard Dungy, who was a warrant officer during World War II. He was originally from a small town in Illinois, Carmi. I wrote an article about warrant officers in World War II, and I didn't know him at the time when I wrote the article, but I got a phone call from a gentleman who was his stepson, who said, "You wrote about officers in World War II, but you didn't include my stepfather. Let me tell you about him." So he sent me some information, and we had a discussion on the phone, and I had enough material to write an article about Mr. Dungy. And after I wrote the article, he called me up and he said, "Chiles, you have made me somebody." I said, "No, Mr. Dungy, you are already somebody. What I did was help tell your story." And from that, we started talking to each other about once a week. And after a while, you know, you get tired of hearing those same war stories. So I said, "Mr. Dungy, why don't you just put these down on a piece of paper and send them to me?" And what we started was arranging for him to tell his story through a book.
And he sent me, just a lot of information. And I organized it for him, provided a table of contents, put it in a structured format, and presented it to him. And he said, wow, I have a book. I always wanted to write a book. So now Mr. Dungy is writing a book, and he's going to share his story with the rest of us. That book is coming out shortly, and it's called The Best Man I Can Be. And it talks about the trials and tribulations and the racism faced by a warrant officer during World War II and thereafter. A remarkable story. Look for it. Leonard Dungy, The Best Man I Can Be. Thank you for honoring veterans. We look forward to seeing you again during Veterans Day in the incoming years. And we encourage you to visit the African American Museum of Beginnings. And when my next book come out, called African American Warrant Officers in Service to Our Country, we'll have another book signing here, and I look forward to seeing you at that event as well. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Wonderful. Well, Farrell Chiles, I appreciate this sincerely. And thank you very much for your contribution to the Veterans History Project.
You're welcome. Thank you.